Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Tower of God New World. In today's video, we are going to check out the brand new SSR unit, Lilio, and we're going to see if this unit is worth summoning for. So I'm going to go over her kit, go over her exclusive equipment, best builds, and multiple other things. So make sure that you guys hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't. I would really appreciate it. And let's not waste any time and let's go ahead and hop right into the video. Now let's go ahead and read her kit. So for her passive, it says Adept Anima. Lilio summons a Puma with 105% of her stats at the start of the battle. When Lilio deals damage to a bleeding enemy, she and the Puma recover 10% of their max HP, and their attack and defense are increased by 8% until the end of the battle, max 20 stacks. The Puma prioritizes attacking Lilio's targets. If Lilio dies, the Puma dies with her. So for her passive, she's getting a huge attack boost and defense boost because she's pretty much increasing her attack and defense by 8%, and she's getting max 20 stacks. So if you multiply 8 times 20, that's pretty much going to be a 160% in total. Like she's pretty much getting 160% defense and 160% attack, which is very nice. Now when we move on to her active skill, it says Valiant Strike. Lilio unleashes her concentrated Shinsu power to deal 450% of her attack as damage to enemies in range, stunning them for 4 seconds. Then the Puma uses the Claw Swipe skill. Puma Claw Swipe. The Puma deals 400% of its attack as damage to an enemy in front of it 2 times, making them bleed to deal 150% of its attack as damage every second for 5 seconds. So she has damage over time in her kit. I'm pretty sure for her passive, yes, she does have bleeding in her passive. And in order for her to get that major, attack and defense boost, she has to deal damage, against enemies who are bleeding. If the enemy is not bleeding, she is not going to get that defense and attack increase. So this active skill pretty much helps her out to, always make sure that enemies are bleeding constantly so that she'll be able to get that attack and defense boost from her passive. Now we move on to her active skill, Pincer Attack. Says Lilio becomes immune to status effects and jumps to the area where enemies are most concentrated to deal 450% of her attack as damage to enemies in range and knock them down for 4 seconds. Then the Puma uses the Ambush skill. The Ambush skill says the Puma becomes immune to status effects and deals 400%, my apologies, of its attack as damage to enemies in range, then makes them bleed to deal 150% of its attack as damage every second for 5 seconds. So she also has bleed in this active skill, and she becomes immune to status effects, and she's going to focus on the enemy. uh she's pretty much going to focus in the area, like it says, jumps to the area where enemies are most concentrated. So she's going to go to an area where there's a lot of enemies, and she's going to pretty much activate this active skill. Now we move on to her special move, Roar of the Beast. It says Lilio fires a Shinto cannon to deal 300% of her attack as damage to all enemies in the path 3 times, paralyzing them for 5 seconds. Enemies hit will bleed for 5 seconds if the Puma is alive, taking 300% of Lilio's attack as damage every second. Lilio becomes immune to status effects while using this skill. So you have damage over time in her ultimate, you have it in her 2 active skills, and then for her passive, you're pretty much just, using all that bleed so that she can pretty much apply the attack and defense buff to herself. So I will say her whole kit, it's not insane, and the reason why is because damage over time isn't really strong in the game. Like I will say damage over time it's not really meta in Tower of God New World unless we have, a support unit in the future that can buff damage over time. But as up to right now, damage over time is not really strong. So the fact that her whole kit revolves around bleed damage, I will say that, her damage might not be the best because damage over time is just not strong at all. But we're going to go ahead and preview her skill to see how her animations work. All right, so she has Adept Anima activated, and then she now has Valiant Strike. So you guys can see that enemy, they got stunned, and plus they have that bleed, they have that damage over time. You see that little red line right there, that red mark? That's bleed damage. So, the bleed damage isn't that insane, but I will say for her ultimate, we use the ultimate right there. So got some major bleed damage right there. So you definitely want to activate her ultimate multiple times so that she'll be able to pretty much deal a lot of bleed damage. And you can clearly see that she gains a permanent attack and defense boost because the enemy, they're bleeding. As long as she's attacking enemies who are bleeding, she's going to gain that, permanent attack and defense boost from her passive, which is really, really good. So that's pretty much her animations. We have the Puma right here. If Lilio dies, the Puma will die with her. And I'm pretty sure if the Puma dies, Lilio will stay alive. So yeah, the Puma, like, it really depends on whether or not Lilio stays alive. So you want to make sure that Lilio is able to pretty much, be a tanky unit so that the Puma can actually stay alive. But yeah, her ultimate right here activates the bleed right there. There you go. And then you pretty much get that attack and defense boost because she's attacking enemy because they're bleeding. Now, when we take a look at her exclusive equipment, it says for level 1, Lilio and her Puma gain a barrier equal to 600% of her attack for 6 seconds when using the pincer attack skill. So she's going to get a barrier for herself and the Puma, which is really, really nice, more survivability. And then for level 2, it says the physical and magic resistance of Lilio and her Puma increased by 30% for 10 seconds when using the Valiant Strike skill. So she's gaining that additional physical and magic resistance, which is really good for her survivability. And then for level 3, it says Roar of the Beast always lands while the Puma is alive. So level 3 is actually pretty good because she's able to literally get a guaranteed hit with her ultimate. So once you activate level 3, if the Puma is still alive, she'll be able to land her ultimate 100% of the time, which is really nice. Now for her level 4, it says the duration of Lilio and her Puma's bleed increases by 5 seconds. I will say, the 5-second increase for her bleed, like for her, like the bleeding, that's not bad, but for her exclusive equipment, there's not really a lot of damage increase in her exclusive equipment. Yes, we have, some survivability for her level 1 and level 2. Level 3, she gets like a guaranteed hit, but like there's not really, there's no buff to her damage. She's not gaining additional damage. She's not getting additional, physical pierce, none of that. So I will say, it would have been nice if they included, some additional damage in her exclusive equipment because, solely relying on her bleed damage is just not enough. Like focusing on bleed damage only is just not strong enough unless we have, a support unit in the future who's going to pretty much amplify bleed damage. But as up to right now, it seems like her whole kit just revolves around bleed damage, and that's literally it. So that's pretty much her exclusive equipment. Is it worth it? Honestly, I will say, like, I mean, level 1 and 2 is for more survivability. Level 3 is guaranteed hit. I mean, if you have her, you might as well level up to level 4. But I will say her exclusive equipment is just not that, it's just not that good, to be honest. Now, look at it, her ignition weapon. So the build that I put for this unit, I decided to go for Sundance. I decided to go for Sundance on her, and then I put Rihanna set. And the reason why I put Rihanna and Sundance is because her kit, she doesn't really have basic attack involved in her kit at all. She doesn't do basic attack. So using, full piece Sundance won't benefit her at all. She's not going to be able to activate the 4-piece set effect. So I used the 2-piece set so that I can increase her accuracy. And then for the Rihanna set, I used the 2-piece set so I can increase her attack by 20%. So I decided to go for a hybrid build. Now, another great build for her would also be Abgrun set. If we come down over here to Abgrun, it says right here, the 2-piece set effect, the wielder's critical damage increase. This is probably a typo right here because this right here, this doesn't make any sense. The wielder's critical damage increase rate increases by 30% until the end of the battle. They should have taken out the rate increase. But she's going to gain a crit damage increase, which is honestly pretty good. So using 2-piece Abgrun and 2-piece Rihanna is really nice for her. But I decided to go for a 2-piece Sundance so that I can get that additional accuracy. So I will say, like, for this unit, she doesn't really have a solid 4-piece ignition weapon set. For more survivability, Bergamot wouldn't be too bad, but I would want her to deal more damage. So putting accuracy, attack, crit damage, I feel like that's a good thing for this unit. Now, when it comes to stats, so what should you focus on with this unit? So you definitely want to get a lot of attack on her. So getting attack percentage as your substat for your ignition weapons is really good. You also want to get some crit damage increase. You also want to get accuracy and evasion. Accuracy is always important, and evasion as well. Swiftness, really good. You can get that through Tri-Essence Facility, and you can get it through Origin Orb. And then magic and physical resistance, the fact that she's going to increase her own magic and physical resistance through her exclusive equipment is really nice. So definitely magic and physical resistance, getting that as a substat wouldn't be too bad. But she is a damage dealing unit, so you want to focus on amplifying her damage. And then you also want to go for physical pierce. You don't want to go for magic pierce because she's not a magic damage type unit. And then effect hit wouldn't be too bad because she's doing a lot of stunning and paralyzing, so getting some effect hit on her would be pretty solid. So the most important stats are attack. You got crit damage increase. Crit rate isn't bad either. Accuracy, evasion, swiftness. You get that to Tri-Essence Facility. Physical pierce and some effect hit. Those are like the top stats for her. Now for your slot 4, you want to go for a crit damage increase, and then for your slot 5, you want to go for physical pierce so that you can amplify her damage. So that's pretty much the build that I'm choosing for this unit. I'm going for hybrid, Sundance, and Rihanna. And when it comes to her limit break, not limit break, revolution. When it comes to a revolution, I activated the tier 1, but then for her tier 4 and 5, when we take a look at them, it says the physical pierce of Roar of the Beast increases by 30%. So she's able to deal a little bit more damage when she uses her ultimate. And then for her tier 5, it says if the Puma is alive, the first time Lilio takes fatal damage in battle, it dies in her place. Lilio then recovers 100% HP and becomes invincible for 3 seconds. This tier 5, honestly, it's not that good because it's not amplifying her damage, and is pretty much just, this is just like it's like a revive. It's just a revive if the Puma is still alive, and if Lilio takes fatal damage, she can pretty much, revive herself and the Puma dies instead. But the problem is, once the Puma dies, you're not going to be able to activate a lot of bleed damage towards the enemy. So you're losing out on bleed damage. Plus, the fact that you're losing out on that bleed damage, you're not gaining that additional attack and defense. So I will say for this tier 5, it's not really good, to be honest. It's not a really good tier for her, because you want to make sure that the Puma stays alive so that she can always deal bleed damage towards the enemy. So yeah, tier 5, not really good. Tier 4, pretty nice, amplifies her damage because of the physical pierce increase. But the Puma dying and then Lilio pretty much staying alive, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I will say the tier 5 is a complete waste. So just look at this. This is crazy. So Endorsi was able to deal 75 billion damage, and look how much damage Lilio was able to deal. So she's able to take a lot of damage. Like, she took 25 billion. That's a lot more than Endorsi, Anak, Iwa, and Garam combined, which is very, very strong. But her damage is just non-existent. So yeah, even though, like, the reason why Endorsi dealt a lot of damage is because she was able to stay alive. So she was just dealing, a lot of damage. Like, she was just dealing a lot of damage because she was the last unit alive. But that still doesn't, take away the fact that you have a tank unit who's dealing more damage than a warrior unit, which is crazy. So yeah, man, her performance is just not that good, and it's not on par with the recent DPS units we have in the game. We have Compressed Rack, we got Joaquin, he is falling off a little bit, but he is still a strong DPS character. You got Kaseya, you got Vivi. We have all of these amazing DPS units, Kaiser. And when you look at Lilio, it's like, she can't really do much compared to these other units. Now, sure, she has 1 purple star. Maybe if I bring her up to 3 red stars, or max, if I have max copies on her, maybe she'll do something. But even Wells on my server said that she's just terrible. She's just non-existent. She doesn't do anything, and she just doesn't bring a lot to the table. So her overall value in adventure mode PvE is just not there. She's not a valuable character, and wasting all of your resources to summon for a unit that's not really good short term is a big mistake. So I will say for Lilio, if you're at an extremely low deficit, like let's say you're at floor 10 or floor 20, sure, she's gonna deal a lot of damage. But once you reach like floor 50 and above, her damage is just microscopic. Now, when it comes to bosses, I did test her against bosses to see if her damage over time was really powerful against bosses, and it's not bad. Her damage over time isn't bad against bosses, but the thing is, Kaiser. The fact that Kaiser is a thing, there's literally no reason for you to even use Lilio against bosses when we have Kaiser. So we have 35 billion damage coming from Lilio right there. It's really, really close to Garam, which is crazy. And then for our second attempt right here, we got 19 billion damage right here. That's not a lot. But when we take a look at Kaiser's damage compared to Lilio's, 43 billion damage coming from Kaiser, which is insane. So let's go ahead and look at the fourth attempt. We got 6 billion damage, and Blaro was able to deal more damage than her, which is insane to me. And then for our last attempt, we got 11 billion. So her damage against bosses is not the best. She can deal decent damage. I'll say that her damage is, I'll say, it's close to Verdi's level, but Kaiser exists, so there's no reason to even use Lilio. If we come over here to trial area, do we have green element unlocked? We don't. We don't have an unlock for today. But yeah, man, her performance is just not that good. If we come over here to Trials of Chaos, let's go ahead and try against uh this team right here. So we have Lilio right here. Let's put in Lilio. And then we're gonna put in, of course, a knock. We're gonna put in Garam. There we go. And then for our tank unit, it's going to be Endorsi. If we can find her, there she is. And then of course we have Yiwa, who's going to be our support. So I mean, let's test and see how well she can perform here. But I think she's gonna get one tapped in this stage, honestly, because this stage isn't really easy. But this is just to show you guys, her performance at high deficits, at high levels. And she just doesn't perform well. Doesn't perform well at all. And she just can't keep up with the current meta DPS units. So look at this right here. Look at her. She's already dead. So, you know, I don't know, man. Like, am I disappointed that this unit is trash? Honestly, I'm not that disappointed because the amount of units, busted units that Netmarble dropped recently is insane. We got Endorsi, Anak, Garam, SR plus Yiwa, Kaiser. Netmarble, they dropped a lot of busted units these past couple months. So that's why I'm not that mad because, they're trying to balance things out. So, I mean, I was expecting for this unit to at least be useful, but she is literally useless at the current meta because bleed damage is just completely irrelevant. And unless we have a support unit who can buff bleed damage, I just don't know if this unit is just going to work. She just doesn't work at high levels. And, wasting all of your summons on a unit that doesn't work long term is just not a wise thing to do. So my only hope for this character is that later on in the future, we have a support unit that can amplify damage over time, and Lilio can pretty much benefit from that support unit. That's my only hope. I might be inhaling a lot of copium, but that's the only way that this unit can actually be useful is if we have a support unit that can buff her overall potential. But as of to right now, there's not a single support unit in the game that can amplify bleed damage or just damage over time in general. So Lilio, major skip. This unit is a skip. Definitely recommend you guys to not summon for her. Unfortunately, she is just not good. And even for my wish list, for my summon wish list, I took her out. I took her out my main priority. She's still in the wish list, but she's not my main priority anymore. It's a knock. I'm still trying to get more copies on my knock. So Lilio, I'm just gonna get more copies of her later on down the line. But am I gonna use her a lot? Not really, because she just doesn't do much for my account. Doesn't really do much for my account. And she's a flop. I'm sorry, but this unit is a flop. For beginner players, she's definitely going to be very, very strong for beginner players. But the thing is, you already have other DPS characters who are way better. So what's the point of for you to summon for a unit who doesn't perform as well as other DPS units? So yeah, that's my take on this unit, and you guys should honestly skip her. But hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. I really appreciate it. And tell me what you guys think in the comment section down below. Is this unit good? Is she bad? Share your opinions. And I hope you guys have a good one. And I'll be catching you guys soon. Peace.